it's Naomi and welcome to my gluten-free, allergy-friendly kitchen. Today I'm going to teach you how to make a Thomas English muffin clone. I'm really excited about this one and I hope you will be too. Let me put this away and we'll get started. Okay, now today's recipe is going to be a little messy, so I am going to put on my apron that my friend Trish got me, and I love it. It makes me feel like Wonder Woman every day. You won't have to mind the ladies being a little saggy. It's, you know, true to real life, I guess. All right, so as you know, in my kitchen, I try to make recipes that are appropriate for everyone. So as I go through this, I'm going to tell you ways that you can make it for a wide variety of allergies. Feel free to ignore anything I say and use what you prefer. Let's go ahead and get started with our liquids. So, what you are going to need is 2 cups of milk or a dairy-free alternative. I have used pretty much all of them. There's advantages and disadvantages to any, but today we're using a coconut milk. That's about 500 milliliters or 500 grams if you're cooking by a scale. A teaspoon of white vinegar, that's 4 grams. A teaspoon of molasses, that's about 5 grams. And this is our secret ingredient to really help it taste like Thomas English muffins. And 3 tablespoons of butter or dairy-free alternative. You can use Fleischmann's unsalted, you could use Earth Balance or Smart Balance. I've used them all. And when I say I've used them all, I mean like I've probably made this recipe like 6 times today. So honestly, I've used them all. And you're going to put them all into your saucepan. So in goes the milk. In goes the vinegar. The vinegar will come into play in part because it's what Thomas does. In part because we're going to guarantee success by using a little bit of baking soda later. In goes the molasses. This is the substitute for Thomas's malt that they use. I guess if you are not gluten-free, you could use rice malt or regular barley malt in place of the molasses, but in my opinion, it tastes pretty much the same. And then the 3 tablespoons of your fat. You could use the shortening, whatever. You are going to heat this up just until it's warm enough to begin melting the butter. And I'll explain that in a second. But let me turn it on. Okay. Now, the reason I made this recipe like so many times today is because I myself killed my yeast. So I'm going to give you a fair shot warning. You want your butter to be soft enough to incorporate into your dough. That's why you're melting the butter. But you don't want your liquid to be so hot that you kill your yeast, right? What I found is just about the perfect temperature when you're using non-dairy milk is to heat it up just until the butter begins to melt, and then when you beat it, it will finish melting out, okay? If you're using real milk, the reason they scald the milk, heat it up, is because it untangles the protein, and it'll give you a better rise and a better texture in your finished good. So if you are using regular milk in this recipe, I suggest that you melt the butter completely and let it cool, okay, until you can stick your finger in it like a baby bottle warm. If you're using non-dairy milk, totally not necessary. Just heat it up until the butter just begins to melt, soft enough that when you add the flour and all the other ingredients, it mushes right into your recipe. I'm going to clear this, I'm going to check that, and then I'll be right back. All right, y'all, hold on. Like I said, it doesn't take very long The heat of the milk will actually finish the job for you. If you want to make it even faster, you can chop up your butter or margarine into even tinier pieces. Now we're going to make the vast majority of our dough, and we're going to add this mixture to it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a teaspoon and a half of salt, which is about 10 grams. We are going to add about a tablespoon of sugar, which is about 12 and a half grams. Okay, this is where it gets a little exciting for me. We are going to add either 2 large eggs, about 4 ounces, or half a cup of my favorite egg substitute, aquafaba. Now, aquafaba is just a fancy name for bean juice. And I find you can get the equivalent of 2 eggs, or about a half a cup, out of 1 15-ounce can of beans. So you can put that in. If you're using regular eggs, beat them up. Your muffins will be a little bit more golden, and they will brown to a little bit more of a golden color. The aquafaba won't quite do that, but it's awesome for people who have egg allergies or who are vegan. You're also going to add a teaspoon of baking soda. Now, time out. This is not necessary. Thomas English muffins do not have baking soda. You can totally skip it, okay? And you'll still get a good English muffin. It'll actually taste a little bit more accurate. But nooks and crannies are the whole point of an English muffin. In my experience, testing this recipe bajillions of times and other recipes on the internet, I found that sometimes the yeast doesn't quite get her done, maybe because you killed it, maybe because you over-rose it, but you don't get the nooks and crannies that you want. But I have found with up to a teaspoon of baking soda, it works almost every time. Now you could use a half a teaspoon, you could skip it all together, but we're going to put a teaspoon in, about 4.8 grams. And finally, we're going to put in 560 grams, about, that's a lie, don't do that, about 7 grams, or about 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. Now, you can use instant yeast, active, dry, doesn't matter. You do want to make sure your liquid is not too hot at this point. Now, I did that several times this morning, and it was not pleasant for anybody involved. Okay, you see how I'm sticking my finger in? That means it's just right. If you can't stick your finger in like that, it's probably too warm. If you do find that you accidentally kill your yeast, just go ahead and measure it out again. Add it to the same mixture. Don't waste ingredients you already measured out. Okay, just add more yeast. Now, if you're using active dry yeast, you must wait 5 minutes to let this proof. If you're using instant yeast, which doesn't have the coating on the outside of the yeast, really you don't need to. But just in case you killed the yeast, you probably want to wait until you see it start to poof and bubble. For me, because I have really new yeast, that's like almost instantaneous, okay? So remember, regular yeast, let it proof. Instant yeast, let it prove itself to you, okay? And now we are going to add the rest of our flour. Okay, now, if you are using regular all-purpose flour, not gluten-free, okay, you might actually need just a bit more flour than I'm calling for in this recipe, because this is going to be a very hydrated dough. If you're using a gluten-free flour, you need to use a cup for cup gluten-free flour. And by cup for cup, I mean in most recipes you shouldn't have to do anything different. It should work just fine. If that's not true, you're not using a cup for cup. The two that I like, one of course is Better Batter, because I'm the Better Batter lady, and the other one is GF Jules. GF Jules and I can interchange recipes, and that's a good sign. And we can also use regular recipes, and that's a good sign. Those are 2 ones I feel very safe recommending. If you have others, please let us know and put them in the comments so that other people can learn. But if it's not a good cup for cup, this recipe is going to be a little iffy for you. 4 cups, there's the 560 grams we were talking about earlier, of a good gluten-free cup for cup flour. You might need up to 5 cups if you're using regular flour. Put it in your mixer, and I'm going to tell you the difference whether you're doing regular or gluten-free, okay? If you're doing regular, use a dough hook. If you're doing gluten-free, use a paddle. That's the first difference. Second difference is if you're kneading it by hand or with a dough hook, it's going to take between 8 and 12 minutes. If you're doing it with the paddle and it's gluten-free, basically just do it until it looks like cookie dough. So, let's let her mix. While we are letting this mix, I am actually going to go ahead and heat up my oven, and I'm going to go ahead and heat up my pan. You want a good heavy pan. I use like a cast iron pan on medium to medium high heat. I edge towards medium high, hot enough to cook, not hot enough to burn, okay? So let's do that. You're going to turn your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to let that preheat. Now we are going to cook the muffins on the stove, and then we're going to dry them out a little bit in the oven. It's a two-part system. All right, let's just pretend like that's been mixed. Now when I say it looks like cookie dough, this is what I mean. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. It looks like cookie dough or icing. Okay, it's not going to be like traditional bread dough. This will be a little less true if you're making it with regular flour. But definitely with gluten-free, it's going to look like cookie dough. You want that stickiness for this to work, okay? And then you're going to flour a surface. Now, I like to use a sugar shaker. I just find that it makes an even floured surface. If you don't have a sugar shaker, just shake, 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 shake your flour. All right. You're going to turn your glob of very sticky dough right onto the floured surface. This recipe should yield you about 12 English muffins if you cut them right. Now, obviously, this is going to be too sticky to handle just by itself. You can never cut this out. So my favorite trick is to go ahead and flour just the outside. Tend to flour my hands, okay? And then just roll it, roll it, roll it, roll it, roll it, until all the surface is rolled, and then the outside won't be sticky anymore. Inside still can be sticky as crud, okay? But the outside won't be sticky, and then you can roll it out. You might need to keep adding a little bit more flour. You're going to roll it to about a ½ inch, or about the depth of a canning lid jar, okay? Pay special attention to the outer edges. They tend to get thicker or thinner. I guess it depends on what you do, okay? Okay, and you're going to cut these out. Now the reason I use a canning lid jar is it's the perfect size, it's the perfect thickness, and as it cooks, it creates a central line that you can stab your fork into for those nooks and crannies. So you just push down, remove the extra, and keep going, okay? Until you have about a dozen. Now when you get the extra dough, you can feel free to knead it together, kind of push it until it's all one glob again, roll it out. These will either fall apart more on you or they will be a little bit tough, but I mean, let's not waste ingredients, right? I happen, of course, to already have some English muffins that I've allowed to rise. You are going to let these rise once you've cut them out for 20 minutes. Okay, so not too long. This is a pretty quick recipe. I'm going to move my phone over to my stove, and I apologize, I have no staff here and I don't do video editing. So I'm just going to move you, and we're going to watch me cook them, and I'm going to explain how to do that.